Welcome into the Action Network podcast. We are presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Brendan Glasheen. Today's episode, Week 17 NFL Best Bets. 14-game slate, Sunday, and of course, Monday Night Football. Great matchup, Buffalo and Cincinnati. Joining the pod this week, usual suspects, Brandon Anderson, who comes from his bunkered down location in parts unknown. It is not Seattle Island. It looks like audio director Matt Mitchell's basement, but that is not where he is. Brandon's here. Jill in his usual spot, Jill Gallant. He hosts the Touchdown Show at Action Network. And we've got Anthony DeBundo back this week. He's in for Luke Swain, Vegas refund. Luke is actually on a real island. He's not on the virtual Seattle Island. Luke is on a vacation, and he much deserved. So we missed Luke this week, but DeBundo, thanks as always for stopping by. Folks, just a couple notes before we get going here. Unders are still hitting at a 56% clip. Underdogs overall this year, they've had a good season through 16 weeks, their best season since 2006. The money line dogs have struggled lately. We'll get to that in a second. And we got two double-digit favorite spots this week. Dallas playing tonight. We're recording before Thursday Night Football. The one spot in the Sunday-Monday window, Kansas City Chiefs. They are currently laying 12.5 points, taking on Denver at home at Arrowhead this weekend. Best Bets episode needs a bounce back week. 3-7 last week. We are 75, 66, and 4 for the season. Without further ado, let's jump into the best bets for week 17. As a reminder, you can find the picks in the Action Network app. Action Network NFL Picks, the Sunday six-pack with Stuckey and Raybon is also there. Brandon Anderson, your first pick. I know the picks ahead here. These guys have not consulted one another, though, however. But this is a pick you gave out earlier in the week. It's a total. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to take a total for Miami and New England. Give me the under here, under 41.5. I grabbed this at 43 earlier in the week. I still like it at 41.5, anywhere in the 40s, really. So, Brendan, you talked about this with me on Sunday night in the podcast. This is a fade of Miami's offense. And Miami's offense has faded fast over the last month, even more with Tua Tagovailoa out. So last 6 weeks, Miami's offense by DVOA, 27th in the NFL. So that has really plummeted here. And if you look at the games where Tua has either played with concussion issues or has missed those games, for those games, Miami is 25th in offensive DVOA. And that included earlier games before this late swoon. Take those games out, Miami's third. They're number one in passing. So this is a huge deal. The offense is cratered lately. But as we talked about, while that's been happening, Miami's defense has quietly gotten pretty good here. Bradley Chubb came over. The pass rush is better. They're actually a top quarter of the league over the last 6 weeks. Top 12 against the run, top 12 against the pass. So Miami quietly has, we knew the offense was bad, but they've kind of stayed afloat with this defense. Well, we already know New England. We already know New England is a great defensive team, not scoring much. We don't need to make that case. So now we've got two of those teams. And we've got Bill Belichick, who didn't know what was coming week one when these teams played, but now has had 3 or 4 months since then to prepare for this unique Miami offense. I think Belichick will have some ideas up his sleeve. And don't forget, they held the Dolphins to only 20 in week one anyway. In hindsight, the way this offense was steamrolling early, that looks pretty good. So that week one game, only 27 points there. Miami, for all the hype about the offense, they've only scored 21 or less 9 times out of the 15 games this year. And we know that offense is falling. Tua's out. And then just look at some of the late season division trends. Unders, when the total is 40 to 47, 56% of the under. If the home favorite is 7 or less, 58% of the under. And then, of course, we're in Foxborough. So looking windy, looking at the chance of rain or snow for Sunday, that only helps. So I like the under here, 41.5. I'd play it anywhere in the 40s if you can get it.
I'd play over half a poncho for someone on this podcast who might be in Foxborough at the game on Sunday. Not looking forward to the inclement weather, but Bill Belichick might be, because weather now is a real thing for Bill Belichick to get wins these days in the NFL. Patriots also the worst offensive team in the first quarter this year. I was looking at the first half total sitting at 20. Slight juice to the under, even money plus 100, or so juice to the over, pardon me, plus 100 to an under 20 first half. Brandon's on the full game under Patriots Dolphins. Jill, what's up? What do you got? First pick.
Yeah, I'm going to take a big favorite right off the bat, Brendan. I'm going to take the 49ers minus 9.5 versus the inept, woeful Raiders. I just think right now we're making a little too big of a deal about the Mr. Irrelevant aspect of feeling good about laying points with a rookie, on the road. Forget about deserve. This offense and defensive combo is pretty much just a set and forget, mainly because when you look at the Raiders defense, they're already going to be missing some guys key that help stop the run. Chandler Jones will be out. Denzel Perriman's been out. He's going to remain to be out. So I think Christian McCaffrey could end up having a huge game because the Raiders are last versus running backs in pass defensive DVOA, and they're 22nd in defensive rushing DVOA. So that's pretty much the 49ers bread and butter when it comes to their offense. I also think that it's not a coincidence that the 49ers are 8-0 straight up and 7-1 against the spread with McCaffrey as the full-time starter in this offense. They're winning games by an average of 16.6 points per game. 6 of those 8 games are won by double digits. Not to mention, Devo could be back too. He stated to come back for practice. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but we'll be able to see a little bit more. If he's back, it's just only going to add more gravy for the 49ers train. For reference, though, this line has been crazy all week. Like it moved, started at 4.5, moved to 6, and then it creeped up to 10.5 once Derek Carr got removed as the starter and Jarrett Stidham is now the starter. And then it's back down to 9.5. So I really couldn't talk myself off of it once it got back under 10. And for Stidham, you don't want to be making your first career start against this 49ers defense. Like he's only come in as a backup in his time. You're a Patriots fan, Brendan, so you're more than aware of the Jarrett Stidham experience, but his career stats are kind of indicative of what he is. 64 pass attempts, 55% completion rates, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And the 49ers are pretty much going to take away what is a quarterback's best friend, which is the running back and passes over the middle. The 49ers rank first defensively in both categories. So while I think, again, taking a 9.5 on the road, it's going to probably be a slow burn. It may take until the fourth quarter to seal the deal. But I think the Niners win this game by double digits. And since the start of last season, the Niners have been favored by 9 or more in 4 games. They're 4-0 straight up and 3-1 against the spread. The most recent example was versus the Cardinals in Mexico, and they won by 28 points.
Fascinating spot for Josh McDaniels, to the head coach, which the Davis family has advocated he'll be back. They're giving him some time, more than the coach in Denver. We'll get to Denver, I think, later in the podcast. But yeah, Jarrett Stidham, there's some things in the last few years that have offended me as a fan of the New England Patriots. And when COVID first started in 2020, when I was told, Stid the kid, he's the next guy for Brady. Bill Belichick went out and signed Cam Newton, and this guy couldn't get on the field ahead of Cam Newton. And we all saw how that experiment worked out in Foxborough. DeBundo, welcome back. What do you got for us? First pick for week 17.
It's not pretty. Almost none of my picks this week are, but I like the Chicago Bears +6 on the road against Detroit. And when this line first opened around 3.5, 4, and the look-ahead lines, I wasn't really planning to bet the Bears, but I think what's happened in the last week since that, one, the Bears, both teams got destroyed last week, both teams losing by 20 plus, but the line moved about 2 points to 6 now. And I just think it's a classic example of a team in a must-win spot at home. Everybody's expecting the Lions to bounce back. Everybody's still on the Lions train, even though they got exposed last week in Carolina. And everyone's expecting them to bounce back and have a good showing here. The Bears have no motivation. They're tanking for the draft pick. There's no reason for them to go out and win this game. I think it's all overbaked into the number, and that these two teams are actually pretty close to one another. I mean, they did play not that long ago, and the Chicago was winning late in the third quarter until the Justin Fields pick 6 that let the Lions right back into the game. And they were down 2 touchdowns, in that game. So they had to come back, and the spread in that game would suggest that, this line's gotten way out of hand because Detroit was only a slight favorite in that game. So now it's 6, and neither defense is any good. I know we talked earlier this year and I said the Lions defense is 32nd in the league and they're not going to consistently be that bad. Well, they have improved, and that's just kind of with variance. Some offenses ran into some turnover problems on them. They have been a little bit better, but let's just take it face value for the season. You exclude turnovers. This is the 31st and the 32nd ranked defense in the NFL, the Bears and the Lions. And the Bears have actually been a top 10 run offense. So I think that the path is there for Fields and Montgomery to find success on the ground, limit the possessions in this game, keep Goff on the sideline, and continue to gash this overrated Lions defensive line that got very fortunate and has not been very good against the run really all season. So I think the Bears find success on the ground here. Yes, the Bears secondary probably also gets torched, but given the backdoor risk and just given all of the risk here, laying 6 with Detroit just because they need to win the game is way too many points. I like the Bears +6.
And your point, small favorite in that matchup early in the season, midway through the year, Bears -3 at home. That was a tight game. Then Chicago outscored them 14-0 in the third, 31-30 Detroit winners. And there was only one turnover in that game, one. And it was the Justin Fields interception.
Let him right back into the game. It was 24-10. I think it was early fourth quarter, maybe or late third quarter when that game turned. And I misspoke earlier. I said Lions were favored, but yes, the Bears were favored in that game. So now you have a 9-point swing. Are the Lions really that much better than they were a month ago? I know the perception on the Lions is that much better, but I don't think they were as bad as the first 8 games indicated. I don't think they've been as good as the last 6 either. So here we are.
Score was knotted at 10. That leads into our next round of picks. Brandon Anderson, you are going to go to the other side here, but in a different way.
I am. Yeah, it's only appropriate. DeBundo and I have yet to be on one of these podcasts together, but we love to go head to head. So, of course, first time.
Is this your first time together on the pod?
First time together here.
This is the second time.
Is it the second?
And the first time was when I backed the Lions against the Packers.
Well,
they
I am going to,
and they got very fortunate to do so. But that was the start of the Lions' luck turning around.
Well, I'm going to back the Lions here, but like you said, Brennan, I'm going to back them with a twist here. So I actually think DeBundo and I are on a pretty similar page here. I do like the Lions. I think that they do win the game here. The Bears are actually, since that game a month ago, the offense has gotten a lot worse lately. Justin Fields picked up an injury. I think is kind of playing through some nagging stuff. They're down only 15.5 points a game the last 4 games. So earlier we were riding Bears overs for a while. That's been out now because it's a little more unreliable. But I was one of the people in the action mush last week on the Lions. I was one of the people that got steamrolled in that one. I'm a little scarred by the Lions defense. So I like Detroit here. If I was going to play a side, I'd play a Lions cover, a Lions team total over. I trust the offense with Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've been the number 5 offense by DVOA. They're averaging over 28 a game. The Bears have allowed 25 or more 8 straight games. This Bears defense is terrible. The Lions are going to score at home where they're good. What I don't like is I don't like the second half. I don't want the back door. Anthony mentioned it. I don't like the back door. So I'm going to just get my first half money and get out of here. Give me Lions -3.5 just in the first half. So I like the offensive score. I trust the Lions early. When you get embarrassed like that against the Panthers, look, Dan Campbell, like we've watched this team, the kneecap biting team. This is the exact sort of team that gets whipped into shape all week and responds with pride early the next game, set the tone, run the ball, block a little harder, all that good stuff. Get things going early. And you look at some of the splits here. Bears defense by DVOA, dead last in the first quarter. Bears defense in the second quarter, dead last. Lions defense in the second half, dead last, but average in the first half. So give me the terrible defense Bears in the first half. Give me the quick early strike lines to kind of get things going, set the tone. Leave the back door open. I don't care. DeBundo, you figure your pick out after that. I'll have my money already at the half. If you look at just first half ATS, Lions are 11-4 against the spread this year. The Bears are 5-10 in the first half ATS. So I do wish that it was under 3. I don't love getting the hook there, but I'd rather take the 3.5 than the full game 6. I don't care about the back door. Get my money and get out of there. Lions first half.
Wow. Yeah. The defense is what you're right. Those DVOA numbers, the defensive numbers, DeBundo, are what do the Bears in the first half. You got a thought though on the +6 angle still?
Yeah, I mean, the Bears offense has looked a lot worse in the last month, and yes, it did coincide with the injury, but I'll push back and I'll say, like, look who they played. I mean, they played the Jets, the Bills, and the Eagles in the last month, and they played the Jets with Simeon. So, like, I think that there's some evidence that like Fields is just going to run all over them. I think that's what's going to happen here. I mean, he did in the last game. They ran for 258 yards in that first meeting. So I'm not sure that, it's going to be a convoy of long runs like the Panthers ran off last week. I don't foresee it being that extreme again. It can't possibly be that bad, but I do worry that the Lions will not get enough stops here.
Yeah, what's interesting, you and I were texting about this game a while ago. And you mentioned, as you were talking about liking the Bears here, yeah, Lions up by 7.5, Bears end up losing by 3. I think we kind of both expect the same thing here. I'm terrified of Justin Fields. I want no part of the second half experience, but I think I like the Lions enough early in the game, and then just get out of there, get the defense, do whatever they're going to do in the second half. I do think the Lions win. I still kind of like Lions to make the playoffs, but yeah, you're right to fear the defense, and to what you said about the Bears offense, I think is dead on. But I trust the Lions to get the statement early, and I'll just take my money and watch the second half.
And the nature is so the nature is so different too, right? You're in Carolina, record low temperatures in Carolina. You go back to your building indoors, your head coach shaking hands with the other head coach, Campbell, saying, "Oh, that was a good old ass kicking." It feels like if he's got these guys on board, which sort of feels like they getting off to a good start is crucial. And that's the way Brandon foresees this matchup going. Jill, second pick.
Yeah, a bit of a coin flip game. I feel like you can make a case for both sides, but I'm going to go with the better team. I'm going to take Bills -1.5 versus the Bengals. Look, I know the Bengals are the hottest team in the NFL. A lot of people are going to point to them saying, look, they beat Kansas City 3 times in a year.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs aren't the Bills. Bills are way better than that. I also think the Bengals rather have been blessed with a little bit of good luck recently.
Yep.
They're facing the Cleveland Browns when it's Deshaun Watson's second start. They're facing the cratering Buccaneers. They almost blew it last week versus the Patriots. And the Bills, top 5 team in creating quarterback pressure. And we've seen that's how you beat the Bengals. And who's now out? Right tackle, La'el Collins, out for the rest of the year with a torn ACL. The Bills also just rise up when they're facing a tougher defense than they do when they play lesser teams. This year, and actually in his career rather, Josh Allen versus defenses allowing under 21 points per game, 14-6-1 against the spread. The defensive injuries as well to Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. Now I am seeing that Hendrickson did come back last week, but he only played a handful of snaps. Hubbard is expected back, but again, it's a hamstring injury. You can't expect him to be fully back there. Those are 2 key parts of their pass rush. So for me, I'm looking at the Bills. I think that this line probably should be closer to -2.5. I feel like we're getting a little bit of a bargain here at -1.5. I will say that if you're looking for even just a little bit more of a safer spot, you can get the Bills money line around -115.
Bengals, as Jill said, hottest team in the league, and they're covering too, folks. They've covered 20 of their last 23 games, the most profitable team against the spread in the NFL over the last 2 seasons. That includes the playoffs, 26-10. They've won and covered 7 straight going into this showdown. Should be good Monday night. And we'll have more on that game, folks, with early next week with shows and content at Action Network, because that's one worth sinking your teeth into. Best Monday night game of the year. No question coming up. DeBundo, second best bet.
Yeah, there are 3 defenses that are top 6 in both run defensive line stopping and pass defensive line stopping based on PFF grades and on pass rush, run block, or run stop win rates. That's from Ben Baldwin. The three defensive lines are the Philadelphia Eagles, the San Francisco 49ers, and the New York Football Jets. And I like the New York Football Jets -1.5 against the Seattle Island Seahawks. Sorry, Brandon. I know you're getting ribbed from all sides for your Seahawks love, but they have fallen off a cliff. And I think it's a good example of why preseason priors do matter. And yes, Geno Smith has played well and above expectations, but since the first 5 weeks of the season, when he played a top 5 quarterback, he has not quite been the same. And he's also not the same when under pressure. His PFF grade when under pressure, 62, 4 turnover worthy plays in the last 3 weeks. He's been struggling quite a bit, and the Jets are going to get a lot of pressure and they're going to stop the run. And then, DK Metcalf is hard to stop, but he'll be visiting Sauce Island this weekend. The real island, Sauce Gardner out wide, the corner for the Jets, who's been a dominant rookie defender. I think that the Jets will be able to run on Seattle, and that is the major key here. Mike White, I know everybody thinks he's great. I'm kind of skeptical on Mike White, but you watch him compared to Zach Wilson, it's a pretty stark difference. And so I think Mike White can do enough to make the short underneath throws that the Seattle defense will give you, and to keep them ahead of the chains just running the ball. I think the Jets end the Seahawks season here and get the win. I'm laying -1.5.
Seattle has lost 3 in a row, straight up, 6 consecutive games against the number. Geno Smith had never even lost 5 straight games against the spread in his career prior to last week. He still leads the NFL in completion percentage, but yes, as to Bundo's point, the the level of play has dropped off slightly. Brendan, I guess we'll just go right to you here and you can respond to the island. I mean, you've already been on record. The island is washed away.
Yeah, abandoned Seattle Island. The island has taken water. The island is under. I am not at an island. I'm in a North Dakota bunker. Island is out of here. I'm on this game too, except I'm going to add a little twist to this one as well. I do like the Jets, but I'm going to play the Jets with an under. I'm going to do the same game parlay plus 239. So Jets minus 1.5 and the under 42.5 together. So Seattle's defense, we talked a lot about them during the island run when we made a lot of money together. That defense was playing pretty well for a while. We talked early in the year, like DeBundo said with the Lions, when you're that bad early, you can really only kind of get better. Like that's just how defense goes. Well, turns out the defense still wasn't very good. They never learned how to tackle. They're back to 29th by DVOA the last 6 weeks. And so that's going to help against the Jets. I agree. I'm not really super in on Mike White, but I am in on Mike White not being Zach Wilson, who's already been announced as inactive this week. With Wilson, the Jets are 27th offense DVOA. Without him, they're 16th. So give me an average sounding offense against a terrible defense. The Seahawks offense is pretty similar to what the Jets are now too. Like DeBundo said, the big difference here is the Jets defense. And that's what really stood out. This line actually started out Seattle -2 and then went all the way to Jets 3. And I was like, oh man, am I going to have to go back to the island? Is this my last stand on the island? No, the island is underwater. We're done. Seattle, I looked into it. 3 times this year, the Seahawks have played a top 10 defense by DVOA. That was the 49ers twice, and then the Bucks one time. In those 3 games, Seahawks went down 21-3, 21-3, and 20-0. This offense, I don't think it's necessarily smoke and mirrors. Even like you mentioned, the Geno Smith completion thing, it's not smoke and mirrors, but it's not necessarily, hey, Geno is elite now. Geno's completion is so high because the man cannot and will not throw the ball away and is taking sacks the whole game. And those are negative plays too, just like incompletions, interceptions, whatever. So I think Seahawks really struggle to score here. If I was going to fully abandon the island and embrace it, I needed the extra juice. So if I like the Jets here to cover, I think it has to be because I like the under, because I think the Jets defense really shows up. Last 4 New York wins, they've covered and gone under, and they've gone under 42.5, 8 of their last 10 games. Jets unders are 10-5 on the season. Home underdogs this year in games that have a home underdog, the under is 65% for the season. That's not Jets. That's all games across the season. So that's been a really favorable trend. So I think the Jets go to Seattle, Mike White and all, and shut this team down. And I think DeBundo's right. I think we end the season, put Seattle Island out of its misery for good. And I like the Jets a little further too. I'm seeing some plus 500 to make the playoffs out there. We're in Seattle. They're in Miami next week. We don't know if Tua will play. New York fans, don't give up on this thing. I think we're still looking pretty solid. You win both of those games by 538.com. You're getting around 90% to make the playoffs. I like the Jets to win here. I like the playoff odds. Give me the Jets cover and under 42.5 together, plus 239.
So I guess the real twist on the Geno completion percentage is he's just protecting himself. It's actually kind of genius on his end for personally to keep his to keep his numbers high, and he can say I had the best completion percentage in the NFL, and that will further boost his resume as a backup quarterback or potentially a starter in other markets if they choose to go there. What do you say, Jill? You hopping aboard here or what?
Yeah, I think, Brendan, it has to be a clean sweep. I'm going to take Jets minus 1.5 as well.
Wow.
And again, superior defense and a fade of Seahawks Island. Like I had Seahawks plus 10 last week. I was holding it down for you, Brandon, and it felt dead by the first quarter. We capsized. We were overrun by water. And honestly, since the Seahawks have returned from London, it's like their defense forgot to come back with them because they're allowing 27.6 points per game. They're bottom 5 in rush defense for DVOA, and they've lost 4 of their last 5. And their only win was over John Wolford and the Rams. And we all know where they're at in this stage of the season. I also think it's a bigger deal that Tyler Lockett is not playing for them. He's bigger for that pass offense that I think a lot of people let on. He was leading the team in first downs converted. We saw them struggle on third down mightily last week against KC. They were 3-9 on third down. which they really needed because in the second half, Kenneth Walker was taking off, but they could not convert on third down at all. And the Jets defense, I think, should be able to withstand any of that type of rushing attack because we have a little bit of a superior quarterback to back. Again, I'm not going to go on the flip side and say that Mike White is competent. He's just not. He's almost competent. Whereas as opposed to Zach Wilson, he's just completely incompetent. So again, just that kind of upgrade. I just don't want to elevate him and say that, okay, he's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL now. But kind of predicting a game script similar to what we saw when the Jets played Chicago and where they just kind of cruise to a double-digit win. The defense takes care of business. So give me Jets -1.5 against the Seahawks.
Of course, in this case, too, you hope for less quarterback. Well, maybe actually you might be promoting it. Well, no, in this case, you wouldn't want that for the Jets. Quarterback murkiness, as Anthony brought up before, that was Simeon playing in the game for the Bears, the game you're referencing from earlier in the year. But now we know it is going to be Mike White as the starter for the Jets, in this case, taking on Seattle on the road. You guys are all going against the trend of Pete Carroll at home off a loss, 27-14-1 against the spread at home off a straight up loss in that spot. So, all right. Abandon Island, get the hell out, bunker down, and go to Jets Island, Sauce Island, Revis Island, whatever. Just name a cornerback. I guess that's how it goes. And we have one more pick. So we blended the DeBundo's second pick with Brandon and Jill's third pick, being all three guys on the Jets. You know, you said it off the top. I'm not putting words in your mouth. You said it, not me. Yeah, a lot of gross ones this week, DeBundo, and your third stint, I think, on the podcast, fourth stint on the podcast now in week 17. Give it to us. Your final pick, please.
The Denver Broncos country. Let's ride Broncos +12.5 at the Kansas City Chiefs.
Sick person.
I watched on Christmas for the first half.
You did.
Like everybody else. I put the Nickelodeon broadcast on. I had a couple of my little cousins over. They were really enjoying it. I enjoyed it too. Patrick Starr broadcasting the Russell Wilson interception was incredible. And we're at the point now where the Broncos...
Is Patrick Starr part of your handicap?
Yes. No, but the Broncos, in a way, yes, because you cannot get lower than that. And this is the time to buy. The Broncos social media is now retweeting players, hyping up Russell Wilson. That's the point we're at now, where I guarantee you somebody in Broncos PR is like, hey, go on Twitter, show support for Russ so we can retweet it and make it look like the walls aren't closing in. You've got Shannon Sharp going on First Take or Undisputed, whatever show he's on, talking about how nobody in the organization likes him. Nobody in the locker room respects him. I mean, that's how bad it is for Denver. And I'm betting the Broncos for the same reason that I bet them a month ago. And it's that their secondary is really good. And they did a good job of making it difficult for Patrick Mahomes. He had 3 interceptions in that game. He was not his sharpest, but he also was forced into some mistakes by this very good top 5 in the league secondary. They got dominated on the ground last week, but Kansas City's not going to do that. They're not going to run all over Denver. And it's still a divisional game. It's still a rivalry in a sense, even though it's been dominated by the Chiefs. And the Chiefs have been a really bad favorite in their division. They have not covered a divisional game all season. They have not been a good home favorite. They have not been a good big favorite under Mahomes. All of that points me toward Denver. And how much has really changed in the last month when Denver was +8.5 at home against Kansas City. Now you're catching, it was as high as 13.5 now down to 12.5. On the road, Kansas City has no reason to get margin. They haven't been able to get margin on anybody. And yes, they did cover last week against Seattle, but how many times was Seattle deep in Kansas City territory, just not converting 4th downs? It felt like they were a lot closer in that game. So this is a classic overinflated line. Nobody wants to bet the Broncos. It's still the NFL. Nobody truly tanks. And there's not like they're tanking anyway, because they don't have their first round pick. Seattle's going to pick in the top 4 this year. So give me the Broncos +12.5. And I'm probably going to be on the Raiders next week when they play the Chiefs, although we'll see with Stidham. But yeah, it's a classic. Hold your nose, ugly play. I don't have like stats to tell you how good Denver is. I mean, they're horrible. They're bottom 3 in series conversion rate offensively. It's a terrible offense, but you only need, maybe 17 points to feel really good about this number. And Denver's been good at getting to, 14 to 17 points this season. Just can't get higher.
Well, you mentioned not much. Well, they did fire Hackett. That happened too.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's probably a good thing, I guess you're saying.
It can't get worse. I mean, the Colts fired Frank Reich and went to Jeff Saturday, who had no coaching experience, and then won a game 6 days later. So how bad can it be? It's one game. You might get an inspired effort because of Hackett getting fired. I don't know. I like, he's not a good coach. I think we can all agree on that. Like, what was the value add of Nate Hackett to this team? It didn't seem like there was much. So you can't really lose much from going to the interim that none of us have ever heard of.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is such a Denver spot based on you're buying at the absolute nadir. My only fear here, why I'm going to probably just pass on this, I think it's Broncos or pass. My fear is that, look, we watched the game on Christmas. We had our Nickelodeon fun. The team quit in that game. I just don't know who they quit on. Did they quit on our buddy Nate Hackett, or were they quitting on Russell Wilson? Because he's still rolling out there this week. And I wonder if that's what the players are really done with. And obviously that's not going anywhere. Russell's stuck around there for a long time. So I am a little worried that they might just be like, no, man, that wasn't the problem here. We don't want this guy quarterbacking our team anymore. He's been so bad. Like the receivers are like openly complaining and bad, terrible body language. So
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay. So really quick, to DeBundo's point, this is in the last hour, folks. We're recording on Thursday. Judy and Hamler went on Twitter. Yep. Did Cortland Sutton, who was the one waving his arms on the broadcast, Russ, run the play? I don't think Sutton was on Twitter, DeBundo. I didn't see his name.
It's all right. Sutton will be in the end zone this weekend, covering the back door when the Chiefs win by 7 in a game that was never competitive.
Come on, Jill, you got to have something here. You got to be thinking something before.
Jill, if you bet Denver a month ago, you have to bet Denver. That's my other thing. If you bet Denver plus 8.5 in Kansas City, you got to bet them today.
Touchdown odds to come out, man, because based on the way the matchup is, he lines up mostly in the slot, and that's where KC struggles to be able to defend. Now, will Russell Wilson actually be able to take advantage of this said advantage? I don't know, but I will say that if you're going to give me it's probably going to be around plus 275 to plus 300 odds for him to score a touchdown this week. That's who I'm going to be looking at in that game.
All I ask is for a terrible game that we can put last on our list Sunday night so that Jill gets one more Broncos game to cover.
It'll be that one. I can guarantee it.
Okay, before we wrap up the show, let's take a very quick look at next week's lines. Week 18, the final week of the regular season. See if we like any numbers now before they adjust to Sunday's action. Brandon Anderson always takes the reins on this for the look ahead line. So a little complicated. And I think folks are going to kind of catch on here once you get started with your analysis. But folks, as we know, playoff implications, teams eliminated, teams that need to win, teams that are playing for the number 1 seed or playing to get in the playoffs. So truly a lot of what happens, that look ahead's hard is the point for this week, because a lot of what happens this week relies on effort, trying, giving a crap next week. So why don't you dive in? You've got some angles now that you're maneuvering.
Yeah. So if you're looking for just a traditional, hey, we've been catching out, last week, I think DeBundo gave out Packers. We caught a point there. On my article, I had the Steelers. We gained 3.5 points to that. If you want to just gain some point value on the line, this is really not the week to do it. I couldn't really find one that I love, partly because every game next week is directly impacted by all the games this week and setting up motivations. I think something like 12 of the 16 games next week, I look at the line and I'm like, well, that could swing a lot. Not a point, like 3 points, 7 points, depending on, well, what if this team rests and, what goes from there. So I'm looking to play a little bit more aggressively here. So if you want to just look for a regular look ahead, this is not your spot, but I'm going to play some week 17 money lines. So I say, okay, who wins or loses week 17? And that determines the rest favorable outcome for week 18. So I'm going to parlay a week 17 money line with the week 18 money line, and the week 18 game I'm pairing. It can't be the same team because the books will reject the bet. You can't put the same team in there, but if you can kind of correlate results. So here's the one I'll give out, and then you can check my article that posts Friday for a few more of these. DeBundo, I got a Broncos one in there. That'll be a doozy for you. Broncos this week, Patriots next week against the resting Bills. If they win and the Chiefs lose, then maybe that's just a resting game for the Bills. 29-1 if you like that one. You really want to go in on Broncos country. Let's ride for that. Here's my pick for today. Give me the New Orleans Saints against the Eagles this week, plus 230. But parlay that with next week, the Cowboys to beat Washington, plus 170. So combine that together, you get a plus 791. So let me start with the Saints. Saints are playing the Eagles, who are highly favored, but still looks like no Jalen Hurts. We did see him in practice today, but I don't think we're going to see him in the game. No Lane Johnson, the star tackle. They are not the same offense without him. No Avonte Maddox, the nickel corner. These things are starting to add up for that team. And honestly, the Saints are playing pretty good football. They're still alive. They are alive for the division, alive for the playoffs. This could be a playoff preview, depending on how things play out. That sounds crazy, but Saints pass defense has been good. Overall, they're the number 10 DVOA team the last 6 weeks. This team is pretty solid, and the Eagles are not what they once were. Now, look, I'm not just going to play a Saints money line. I don't think the Saints win. I think they could win, though. And if they do win, look at next week. Right now, Dallas is a 4.5-point underdog in Washington. That's because we expect the Cowboys to be resting, because the 1 seed probably is wrapped up by then. If the Eagles win this game, the Cowboys are locked into the 5 seed. If the Saints win instead, and of course the Cowboys hopefully won Thursday night by the time you're listening to this, they're huge favorites, so we expect them to. Now, I think the Cowboys end up favored against Washington. Now they have every incentive to go get the win. I don't need to make the case for why Dallas is better than Washington. You already know that they're better. They're trying, they're favored. And now, heading next week, if the Saints got the win this week, we got a plus 791 money line on a Cowboys team that wants to win against Washington, who frankly might be eliminated. If they lose this week and get a couple other results, Washington might be out. They might be resting. Maybe they play rookie Sam Howell at quarterback to see what they've got there. So got to get creative with these. You know, there's a better chance we're going to lose than hit this one. But if the Saints win this week, then we get a really nice spot for next week. You can do more with it. You could add a 49ers win because they'd have a little incentive extra to do it. You could add a Vikings win, same reason. So if you kind of think creatively on how to combine these, you can still play a little look ahead, play the money lines because you want the win here. The win-loss is the result we're keying on. So Saints this week, Cowboys next week, plus 791. That's the look ahead this week.
That was like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia in the mailroom. Just like all these connected webs and everything. That was fabulous.
What do you think he's looking at right now? He's bunkered down in North Dakota. He's got the web up right now. That's what he's got in front of him there in his new bunkered down location.
That's
right.
I'm looking at the Packers.
Carson Wentz.
All right, fellas, let's recap the picks. We'll get ourselves out of here to wrap up the Week 17 Best Bets episode. Brandon Anderson, his picks for Week 17. He's on New England, Miami, under 41.5. He's on the Detroit Lions, first half, minus 3.5. And he's got a parlay for us over on the FanDuel Sportsbook at plus 239. You can get the Jets, minus 1.5. And he's going to take the under on Jets Seahawks, under 42.5. Jill's on the Niners, minus 9.5, hosting Jarrett Stidham and the Raiders. Buffalo, Monday night, minus 1.5. And he's also on the Jets, minus 1.5. DeBundo on the Bears, full game, plus 6 against Detroit. Jets, minus 1.5. And the Denver Broncos, plus 12.5 as of right now. Okay, folks, that'll do it here on the Action Network podcast, Week 17 Best Bets. We are presented by FanDuel. Thanks to Brandon, Jill, and DeBundo. Best of luck with your bets this weekend. We will see you for the recap episode Monday morning. I'm Brendan Glasheen. Thanks again for joining us on the Action Network podcast.